Welcome everyone to the Digital Town Hall number 24, Wednesday, July 29th, 2020, where never dreamed we'd be still going, but we are. Things are changing. I'd like to thank our sponsors, CUSN, or OX, formerly CUSN, Credit Union Service Network, Doug Burke and his team, who continually support us. Member Pass, if you're looking for digital security and touchless digital security, that's definitely on the way. We're going to have to, think more about identity. Obviously, my group, Big Best Innovation Group, and always good friend, longtime friend, and my co-host on this, Mike Lawson from CU Broadcast. Hey, Mike.
Nice to see you again, sir.
Yes, and thanks for supporting us. So let's move on to the rules of engagement. The first rule is if you see this guy run, let's say you have rodents in your house. You can take a screenshot right now and you can get rid of those rodents. Actually, this is a dear friend, Glen Sarvady. If you've listened to the big cast, you know he is the heart and the soul of that.
Oh, yeah.
We've worked together for the last 6 years on that podcast, and I invited him today because I think there's a lot to be said around payments and what's going on, particularly as we watch the government meet with the top tech providers today around duopolies, monopolies. So there's a lot to discuss there, and I thought Glen could bring some unique perspective to that. We have some good talking points lined up. Welcome, Glen.
Cool.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, man, always. Glen is with 420 Cannabis Productions, I believe. Isn't that the name of your organization, Glen?
I thought maybe we get away without talking about that.
Well, it's a big thing in the COVID era. But
154 advisors.
154 advisors. So we'll get to that in just a bit. Let's move on. So rules of engagement, the rules, the way we do this. One, I'm going to chat. If there is something your credit union wants to discuss with the rest of the group, a burning topic, you need to bring something up, you want to get feedback from someone else, just let us know in the chat box and we will get you on deck to talk. The second piece is we don't want any Zoom bombing, so we need you to check in the chat box. You need to tell us who you are, what credit union you're with. Maybe your Zoom name is Chorus Nightingale Note Taker, whatever that thing is. We don't know what that means, and we don't want any inappropriate stuff on here. So if you tell us who you are, we assume you're a human, and we will make sure that you're covered. If you're listening to a topic and you feel compelled to dig deeper, let's say that one of our famous other folks who likes to speak, like Jonathan Silly, Tom won't be with us today, Andrew Bertrand, they mentioned something, Gary Coates, and you want to know more about it, but you don't want to interrupt it, you're welcome to hit them directly on the chat box. You can drop down, find their name, whoever was speaking that you want to talk to, and ask them a direct question. If there is information that you think a broader audience should know, or we need to do something more, we will drop kick that topic right over to Mike Lawson, who will take it on in the CU broadcast mechanism to talk more in depth, where he can really use his actual journalist credentials and really get you a good interview, whereas I'm just a guy in a hat. If there's a sense that, you need to know that these are being recorded, and so they will be published on CU broadcast. As such, if you're going to say something or whatever that you're concerned about being published, you have two options. One, don't say it. We hope that you will not do that. The second option is you're welcome to talk about it, but if you'll let us know either in the chat or out loud while you're talking that you would like that removed from the final product, our editors will take care of that. So let's move on to the next one. It's always the same thing, the canary and the chat button. If you don't know where the chat button is by now, I feel sad for you. It's at the bottom there. I'm confident that everyone knows where the chat button is, so I'm going to let that go. So let's get into it. Again, I've already thanked today's sponsors, so thank you, sponsors. We have a new sponsor coming aboard. I'm going to make that announcement soon. It's a big one, and it's a very exciting opportunity to have them with us, and I think they're going to bring a lot of value to the show, and so they reached out, and I'm excited to special announce that here, hopefully this week. I'll be making that announcement, and I think everybody will appreciate that. So that'll be an announcement I make soon. So without further ado, does anybody have a topic they want to bring up? Jonathan, are you seeing anything crazy out in Poughkeepsie? Is life back to normal? No one's wearing masks. You guys just wander around. All the branches are open. People are ice skating.
Great.
unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I would describe it here.
Mhm.
It's interesting. We're currently in what New York calls phase 4 of reopening, which is essentially about as far as we can go without saying, okay, COVID's gone. So we have gone ahead. We've reopened our branches. We do limit the number of people that can go in them at any given time, but they are no longer appointment only. They are open to the general membership at this point, and so we're enforcing masks and social distancing and all that good stuff, just as the New York State guidelines require. I think what we're seeing, and I think this is probably especially prevalent in areas of the country that have been sort of enforcing the social distancing and mask guidance and those types of rules, is that there's definitely I think a growing sense of social distancing and sort of burnout among not only just sort of I guess not only our membership but sort of the public in general. And I see that there's a lot of people are becoming more lax, and I think that's what
you think complacency is setting in.
Yeah, and so we're starting to see more, and this is what I worry about in New York right now, is that we've been so regimented about masks, social distancing. It's enforced. It's the rule. It's the law. Between the governor's executive orders and how it's being enforced, there are people that are slowly starting to push back against that, and if not overtly pushing back against it, sort of just being lax in terms of following the rules when they know they should but they aren't. Perfect example is we're seeing, even just in neighborhoods where I live, where others live, there are more gatherings that are clearly not following social distancing guideline or mask guidelines. And so I know that the worry locally and in our area of the Mid-Hudson Valley is, will we start to see a spike in cases? The other concern that is definitely playing into our mind right now is, will the rising cases in other areas of the country start to trickle into New York? Because people are coming here, whether they're quarantining for 2 weeks or not. I think we're up to like 36 states on the governor's mandatory 2-week quarantine list in New York, and so that is the potential to become an issue and potentially cause our cases to increase too. So I think a lot of it is we're settling into basically a risk management, long-term risk management scenario for the credit union and honestly the region. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, and if people eventually get complacent to the point where we see a significant rise in cases. I seriously hope it doesn't happen there, but between that and contending with what other parts of the country are seeing, where people that are being asked to wear masks are not always receptive to that. And there's a security risk if somebody either becomes violent or agitated when asked to wear their mask or what have you. It's not something that's happened to us directly, but we all see it in the news, and it's certainly a concern on our branch staff's mind.
Down or whatever about that. Yeah. And
yes, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. So one thing it's fascinating to me is, as you move out of this, is there any sense or thought of doing a kind of a post-mortem on COVID, right? Like, okay, let's say, we've been busy fighting the fire. Now let's look at what the fire did. How many members did we lose? Is there any reporting or, what was pre and post COVID? I feel like that is a package from an analytics standpoint that would be valuable as people start to move through to sort of assess what happened.
Right, and we absolutely have been doing it's not necessarily new reporting, but we are particularly interested in the reporting of membership and in regards to growth or decline, as well as loan and share growth and decline during this time. Honestly, what we're seeing is that absolutely membership growth has slowed significantly, and where we normally have seen very solid loan growth year over year, by this point has actually slowed to a trickle, whereas deposit growth has gone through the roof as people are really trying to be careful, save, not spend money. They're not going anywhere to spend money. They're not going to stores to buy stuff, although there's still a lot of Amazon shopping going on. But there are definite trends related to COVID that have disrupted the year-over-year norms for our organization.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting concept for everyone. We're glad to have you back and appreciate the update.
Sure.
One quick question, if I can, Jonathan. You mentioned that you opened the branches. Have you gotten to the point at some points where you have had to have people wait outside that you've hit capacity, or how comfortable have people been? Have you kind of gotten back to something approaching your usual traffic?
Yeah, so we are definitely not at our usual traffic by any means. And I think, it's sort of time will tell as to exactly how that trends. We only opened the branches a few weeks ago, so we don't have a lot of data to point to this yet. I think we haven't had any issues with sort of staggering access to the branches. The way we're handling this is we've made it very clear to our membership through signage, constant communication, that if you come to a branch and there are more people than we can have in the branch at that time, we'll take your name, we'll take your cell phone number, and we will either call or text you when it's okay. We now have a capacity for you to come into the branch. I think our members know that that's our policy at this point. They've sort of adapted to it pretty well, and honestly, it has made a lot of them basically say, okay, do I really need to go or not? And they stay home if they don't need to go. The one interesting thing we've observed, though, is that for members that have been coming into the branch, and I was having this conversation with one of my assistant vice presidents yesterday or a couple of days ago, we have seen a huge pent-up demand for coin deposits. It is, our machines are taking a beating right now.
That's where they all are.
With coin deposits. So it seems like everybody's been hoarding their change, and now it's okay, let's go get it into our accounts.
I was just about to talk about that. That's interesting. So that was the pressure release valve.
Yeah, so that's been very interesting.
Where were they getting them? I mean,
I don't
was Amazon
know.
shipping them
Exactly.
I'm trying to figure out how they hoarded them.
It's crazy.
During this period. What were they outside collecting them?
It's weird.
Spring cleaning and they found a lot? I don't know. I mean, the couch is a treasure trove, I'm not going to lie, but no, that's fantastic. Well, thanks again. Great question, Glenn. Sure. Certainly something you and I were talking about was, do branches recover and stick around, or do they go away? And we'll have to listen to the upcoming podcast to hear our answers to that. But let's switch over. I'm going to just chat with Gary for a minute, mainly because Gary is the leader, the expert of data analytics. He does a lot for his organization. And this thought of COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID, COVID impact reporting, I just wanted to get your take on that, Gary.
John, sorry, say the question again.
So Gary's with Unitas out in Portland. And Gary, I was asking, have you been developing some sort of post and pre-COVID type reporting, based on trends of previous years, as Jonathan was mentioning, sort of moving forward and what the impact is?
We haven't started that yet, but what we're doing is putting together a report for our response to it. So how many skip pays have we done? How many PPP loans we've done? All of the adjustments that we made as a response to COVID. And I believe that we're putting it together in a format that we're going to actually make available to our members.
Yeah.
Not just internally.
Yeah. And what interested me was, well, the way Jonathan put it is, how far off course are you from Plan 2020? That was the thing. That's the one that interests me. Like, are we, we didn't make it out of the harbor, or are we? Well, we could get back on course, because I think that's going to have a big impact. And then how much budget was spent, defending this, that now is not going to be there for any projects if you did want to get back on course.
Yeah, we've completely switched our projects to cost-cutting projects, looking at all of our vendor relationships and seeing if we either need to not re-up or if we need to actually get out of some of them. It completely changed our mindset. The first quarter is always slow anyway, and then this kind of hit in March. And so basically everything changed in March, and we had to completely think differently. A lot of the things that we had on our plate of projects that we wanted to do this year, a couple of them got moved up. We're working on a virtual branch right now. We're implementing Glen. That's on target. We're going to be kicking that off next month. So we've already added chat to our website. That was on our radar for next year, and so we accelerated that. So some things got accelerated, some things got put on the back burner, and some things actually we may not do.
Cool. Well, I thank you for sharing. Without getting too political or making this for anybody, do you still have some big problems downtown where your big branch is? Everything okay?
Yeah, no, everything's not okay.
Yeah, I didn't think it was. Seems to be escalating from what I can tell.
Correct.
Yeah.
I sent you something. I think they may be coming to Colorado.
Yeah, a lot of people here are armed. None of us are composting or hugging trees out this way, so they may be in for a surprise.
Yeah.
It's not me so much, it's the rest of Colorado.
Right.
But no, I think it's another thing we're having to deal with. It's yet another point.
Right.
No, I appreciate you sharing. Just real quick, before I start, and some of these fall right into the talking points that Glenn and I wanted to touch on. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? I didn't see if Andrew was on. I know Tom's not here today. He wasn't around. Is Kevin Sarvady on? He should, but no, he's off today. So, I see Eric's here. I still want to catch up and hear what's going on in his neck of the woods, because that's an interesting area to me, is Missouri and Illinois and that whole area there. So, but I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But if he wants to pipe up, he's more than welcome to. So with that in mind, let me switch over. We're going to talk a little bit about payments. And where we're going to start is contactless payments. So, a lot of us were in the midst of implementing this. A lot of us were skipping it. We were dealing with, the switch over for EMV. And now all of a sudden here we are, and contactless is important. It's, potentially important for the foreseeable future. Glenn, talk to me. What are you seeing out there? I know you, and give everybody just a quick background for those that don't know you on what you do in payments, and kind of give just a quick bio, just so everybody knows your pedigree, if you will.
Sure, happy to do that. I go back in the payment space about 25 years. I'd say that I kind of built up my expertise at CheckFree back before, right about the time I joined, right about the time they went public, and left just before they were acquired by Fiserv. So I spent
just before the Death Star was able to bring them in. Got it.
I outran them. But so that was kind of where I picked up my payments expertise. And I brought up to McKinsey & Company for a while. I was a payments expert there for about 6 years. Got involved in, I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with the Federal Reserve study, where they go through and pull payments every 3 years. I was involved with that. I've been doing my own thing for about 5 years now, really looking at the intersection of the fintech companies and particularly the smaller institutions, which is what I really noticed, because I joined McKinsey through a smaller boutique firm that they had acquired. And as time went on, they were less able to support the smaller institutions, and credit unions have always had a special place in my heart. I actually helped to start one at the University of Pennsylvania when I was at school there. And I've been a credit union member of Great Lakes Credit Union outside Chicago back when I was a Federal Reserve examiner for a couple of years as well. So I've been both a payments geek in general, and then also just diving into the specifics around this for some time. Stepping back on contactless, though, one of the things that comes to my mind, and John, I think you and I talked about this a little bit, the notion of contactless was a totally kind of inside baseball term that was referring to these credit cards that you could just tap and go until March.
Yeah, an average consumer wouldn't have known what you were talking about unless they were European.
And now they don't, they probably still don't think of it from a card standpoint, but there's probably a commercial on every single station break when you're watching television where Uber or somebody's talking about contactless service.
Oh yeah, yeah. Your pizzas are dropped off by anonymous people in masks that run away. I have the Ring. I'm gonna make a big section of videos of Domino's people just dropping pizzas off and running for their life, like something happened.
I don't get it either. I mean, it's become now. It's a big selling point to people. I saw a commercial last night that I hadn't seen before for Safelite, the auto glass people, and they were really touting how you can get your glass installed on your car on a contactless basis. I'm like, I don't recall ever touching the Safelite guy before, but suddenly that's something that they've got to actually highlight in their.
Well, yeah. Well,
in their proposition.
one of the things that was blowing me away is how quickly Redbox has retrofitted. I don't know. Anybody else see Redbox around? We have them here in Colorado. They're at most of the 7-Elevens and gas stations and things like that. And they revamped pretty quickly all of their kiosk device to be contactless.
Really?
It's pretty impressive.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the notion of contactless obviously is getting a push, and whether it's literally the terminology around that card that just gets tapped or not, I mean, obviously that idea is being ingrained in people's heads. I find it also interesting that, contactless when you're going through the drive-through window at a fast food place or something like that.
Contactless baking, right?
It's not 100%, but I do see in most cases that, someone with gloved hands is handing you the terminal so that you can be the one that actually puts the card in. They don't actually take your credit card. So as long as
meanwhile, we're sending through nasty pneumatic tubes that I'm pretty sure Jonathan Silly licks each one before he sends it through. Because you have to grease them up to get them through that pneumatic tube. They're pretty old.
So unless people's perceptions of that change over time, I think clearly there is a new opportunity. And I just saw, more broadly than this, it was an overall mobile payment study that the Boston Fed released recently. The data unfortunately predates COVID, so it's not incredibly relevant because obviously we know things have changed. They captured most of the data. I think it was June, July of last year. But part of their point was that people are moving. Well, no, I'm sorry. What I was going to say was banks are interested in the contactless cards, but they've pretty much taken the approach of, yeah, when the cards expire, we'll ship out the new one. It'll be contactless, or when we get a new customer. But we're not looking at reissuing in advance.
So, are you suggesting this is a marketing opportunity?
I would. Yes, I was actually thinking of it more as a defensive opportunity because the way we talk about it a lot, John, is top of wallet and specifically top of app. Now, top of app doesn't really matter if it's contactless or not because it doesn't make a difference what the physical card looks like. But if people are uncomfortable actually dealing with the swiper and whatnot, then if they get a contactless card from somebody else, that may be just enough of a little tipping point.
Push them over the edge and start using that as a
card. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what's involved in that? I mean, a reissue, that would be
it's an expense.
It's an expense, yeah. And how many terminals out there do you think the POS terminals, is it the vast majority of them because of NFC, Apple Pay, they support those?
I don't think it's a vast majority. I think it's, in terms of the big players. And again, if you think about who's open and who isn't open, you're probably going to hit, I think you're pretty safely going to be covered at the big box stores and things like that. You're probably not going to be as covered at the SMBs, the small merchants. But again, the same logic is applying where you've probably got people who are trying to stay contactless, whether to satisfy their customers or because the small merchants themselves are uncomfortable. And they may have that extra impetus to install them as well.
And John, this is Jonathan. We're actually getting ready to roll out contactless cards here in the October timeframe. So we're going contactless on all of our debit and credit at that point.
So those would be pre-licked, right?
That's correct. Just to make sure I still do my job.
Yeah, I got you. But you're going to roll it out to everyone.
So we're gonna roll it out to. We're not going to do a mass reissue, but it will become a standard on everything. And what will be available is that if our members are really interested in having a contactless card, they'll be able to come in and have an instant issue contactless card issued to them and replace their existing card if they'd like.
So that seems like a tremendous marketing opportunity. I've watched, Ent here in our local area really take advantage of the television, more people watching news. they use my sister-in-law frequently as one of the people in their videos, so it freaks me out occasionally because she looks just like my wife. I'm watching TV and I'm thinking, my wife. And same thing with the billboards. She's up on a lot of billboards. That's a whole nother problem I have. But switching over there, you know, it seems like Domino's, all those guys have, you know, as Glenn was mentioning, seems like saying, hey, you know, Hudson Valley's got you covered, you know, come by and get your contactless card today. Seems like a real valuable way to go. Just real quick, because he's unmuted, and that means he may be available to talk. And one of my favorite people, Kevin Wright. Kevin, are you, you know, you're kind of in the heart of this in Florida right now. Are you guys looking at anything like that? And he may not respond, so he might not be able to. So we'll see.
So we went completely contactless last year when we changed our name.
Oh.
We did a full mass reissue. So, and we talked about marketing this out, and we've done a little bit of marketing. Some of our marketing people feel like it's a little slimy to push too hard on it. I don't know if I necessarily agree, but we've gotten some through. But I mean, I got to tell you that the problem is people aren't using their card anyway, right? I mean, our numbers are starting to get a little bit better month over month, but if I look against last year, we're at 50%. I mean, that's just where it is utilization-wise. And on credit cards, it's worse. I mean, debit cards, it's gotten a little bit better, but credit cards, it's significantly worse. You know, fee income is a fifth of where it was. Mortgages are flying, but the rates are so low and have been for so long that income is dramatically adjusted from that. I mean, we've dropped from 80% loan to share down to just below 70% loan to share.
Wow.
And that's because simultaneously, while they're not spending, we have floods of money that are coming in to their share accounts. And by the way, our rates are not good. So it's not like they're doing it to save. I mean, our loan rates are competitive, but we're definitely not the lowest on the block. We've looked around to see some of the people whose income levels are higher, and we're thinking, how are they closing these loans? Because we just can't get any traction on credit cards, personal lines of credit, and autos. We're just getting killed by the captives. And before this happened, we were number 3 in all of Central Florida with indirect. We were doing between 30 and 40 million a month in indirect. Now we're doing 5 to 7 million. So it's now on the flip side, we don't have as many people turning in cars, so you know you're not having to fight that. But again, the numbers are they're horrible. And I wish we could get more people running, because at this point, with all of our fee income disappearing, I'd really like to get the interchange income up. But I mean, we're just getting hit by all sides.
So you believe they're kind of hunkering down, and because the debit card would be the go-to card probably for spending and the you know, the staples, the grocery stores and stuff like that. So but what you're probably seeing is that's all still happening, but it's the extemporaneous stuff that's normally there that makes up that other 10, 20% that you dropped.
Well, and so here's the other thing. You know, our membership, we were founded as a teachers credit union, and you know, we're community based now, but you know, a very large percentage of our members are still teachers. And teachers have definitely felt the impact of this, because, I mean, down here it's almost been comical as to what is the return to school plan. You know, Orange County, which is one of the largest school districts in all of Florida, literally had a discussion that they weren't going to make a decision, and then came out 2 days later and said, by the way, we're going to start this virtual school on August 10th. Get ready now. They gave people, you know, 2 weeks to essentially stick their kids in a virtual class where the parents are required to participate as well, even though normal school won't start until the 27th, just so that they can test this out and see what it would be like. So, and then teachers are nervous because what's going to happen if they get sick? You know, how many teachers do they have in reserves anyway, and then are they end up going to get sent home after that? So there's a lot of teachers right now who are definitely saving. Normally during the summers, we see all that cash go out, right? We have we have all the summer pay that comes in May, and so it's higher. And by the end of the summer, they're depleted, and some of them even need short-term loans. Not this year because nobody's doing anything.
I know you know my story. I started off as a teacher in Hillsborough County, just down the way from you, and I'm still in touch with some of my friends. One of which is she was my principal. Now she's higher up in the administration, and I was just chatting with her like, "What are you guys going to do?" And she said there are a whole lot of folks, a whole lot of teachers, and this may be helpful to you, but they're considering retirement. Because they'll teach on forever. I mean, I taught with teachers that taught forever. They were fantastic teachers, but they feel like they're in that risk zone. And I caught chickenpox twice when I was a teacher. Not once, but twice. You're not supposed to catch it twice.
Sure.
Kids, I mean, common sense tells me that it's a fear. I get it that they're not supposed to drive, but the older folks, there is some concern. So I wonder what happens when they all start retiring and start pulling that money out of the system and bringing it to you. And what you're describing is a similar problem in 2008, where there was a lot of liquidity, but no loans to offset it. The
other problem with 2008 though is we also had a bunch of people running up credit cards because they were living off those credit cards, and we were getting income off of that. Whereas at this point, it's the opposite. I mean, people look. Don't get me wrong. On the one hand, I'm like, wow, people are really thinking ahead and they're protecting themselves. They paid down their balances. They're not putting themselves in a bad position. On the other hand, I also look at all the mortgages that aren't being paid with people who've been deferred, and looking at the income or lack of income that's coming in and saying, we've got a freight train coming, and everybody here thinks this is being overstated, and it's not a problem because all they see is people spending on things that they wouldn't normally spend. I mean, you can't buy a jet boat right now because they're sold out. There are waiting lists for RVs.
Yeah, you're right.
That's never happened.
I had somebody offer me a bunch of money for my RV. I almost sold it and drove home.
So when you see that going on, and then you see reports on it's going to be terrible, people just don't believe it. So you're fighting both sides. But I mean, I can say from at least from what I'm seeing, we definitely have a ton of members who are preparing to hunker down for the longer term.
Well, it's a combination of cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias, right? We want this to be okay, and so the way to make it okay is to believe things that may or may not be okay. And unfortunately, there's so much information. Anyways, it's a whole different thing. But Kevin, I really appreciate you sharing all that. One of the things you just mentioned was credit cards actually being paid down. I think, Glenn, that was something that you wanted to talk about behavior.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I was going to jump ahead because I thought, Kevin, you really kind of teed up a couple of things I wanted to talk about. It's a bizarre situation. It's almost.
And I should mention, Glenn, you're in Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm in Atlanta. I am literally, it would be a long walk, but just for perspective, I am very close to the CDC. So the neighborhood, the perspective that I get, I think, at least, you hear about Georgia as being one of the most permissive states, but as you radiate further away from the CDC, we're kind of mask wearer central based on where
Well, yeah, it's kind of like living by the teacher, oh yeah, my teacher lives 3 doors down from me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that I think that exactly for the first time in I think 3 years the amount of outstanding credit balances went below $1 trillion. I mean, we took, as Kevin said, after we actually had, because people institutions contracted credit lines, there were write-offs and whatnot, and people had less disposable income. They kind of shifted away from credit cards. Credit card balances and credit card spending really declined in the first part of the 2010s. It took a long time to come back. It was finally at an upward trend. And now I think we're back to about a 3-year low, which again, on one level, it's one of those careful what you wish for kind of things. You're getting good behavior and people are reducing, but on the other hand, it's happening at the exact same time where you actually could use the income. But on the other hand, if they were spending it, we'd probably be very concerned about, are they actually going to be able to pay it off? So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Well, and that's why I was asking Jonathan about the trend. So, and it would kind of give Kevin some light at the end of the tunnel. And that's, does that change as the complacency sets in, or as things get better? And that's what I was interested in, or are people still just waiting for the second wave in the fall? And I think his point about schools is, I mean, did I actually hear him say that the parents are required to participate? Because how can you even do that if you have a job?
If you got a kid under the age
Well, Kevin's going to speak. He
14,
unmuted. He's
have a
got
hard
some
time.
points on this. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so they absolutely, so the stance of the school system and what has been sent out to all of the parents is that virtual school requires parental participation. They must participate with their children. So, you know, like one of the things that we have is we have employees who are saying, hey, we'd like to work remote in order to be able to participate with our kids with virtual school. And the first question we have to ask is, okay, but how do you actually work when you're doing that? Like, will that actually work for you? In some roles it does, and in some roles it doesn't. For instance, like my BI folks, well, I don't care what time of day they're doing their work. So if they're helping their kids all day, that's fine with me, and they can work in the evenings. But my contact center folks, well, you've got to be on the calls the whole time. So can you actually participate, or is it more of my child's really self-sufficient, I just need to make sure he doesn't burn the joint down? And
Yeah,
so
I think
there's
that's an opportunity for combining. You bring the member onto the Zoom with you, with your kid, and that way you can get extra help. But no, I totally see that being a huge problem. And I mean, do you anticipate schools opening in Orange County? Or you're in Orange, right?
well, technically we're in Seminole, but we have branches in 5 counties. So,
Okay.
and
Sumter,
it's
Orange,
5 different
gotcha.
school districts which, by the way, are not doing the same thing in any way,
No,
shape,
that's
or
the
form.
other problem. Yeah, there's no coordination. I know Hillsboro's the same way.
So our bet is school will open. Right now, the numbers that we're seeing is about 30% are going to send their kids back to school. 70% are going to keep them home. And we feel like if they open up, if the numbers go back up again down here, which I have no reason to believe that they won't, that schools will then reclose within 30 to 60 days, because they're going to run out of people because of coming into contact and then having to go out for 14 days, and then all the other teachers that they came into contact with in the cafeteria or break room or wherever, and they're just going to flat out run out of people. And the way that they're doing some of the virtual schools is because they have multiple different programs, but in one of the instances, you're participating with the teacher who's in the classroom, and she's simultaneously teaching virtual as well as in class. So again, when that body goes out, who's then gonna go ahead and lead? And the other thing that the schools face is if they have reduced attendance, they lose out on all kinds of money that they would normally get from the state. So they're really trying to grasp onto that too.
Wow.
And then in terms of capacities, a teacher in person has to handle, it's like, I think it's 30 kids, but a virtual teacher can handle 60 kids. So then some of the teachers are also concerned that they'll shut it off, go all virtual, and then reduce the payroll by just reducing teachers.
Well, they absolutely will, but what they'll get, I think, is they're going to have a bigger problem than they think, because a lot of their stalwarts, their cornerstones, are the older teachers who are just going to, most of them don't have to work anyways. Most of the teachers I worked with all did it because they loved it. Nobody gets paid enough to be a teacher. Trust me, I had to quit. And so they can just go, yep, I got 20 years in, I'm just going to retire. And I don't know who replaces them. There's not a deep bench for that because there isn't a lot of money to be made in it.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting that, this coming month to see how this all starts to pan out, and then going into September. And then, of course, we've got hurricanes to look out for. So we're looking for a great 2020.
It just keeps coming. But the other thing, just thinking out loud, is if a bunch of these teachers retire and they all have a lot of time in, they're also going to get a big chunk inbound. So it could be that, what do you do is it a bear or a bull? I want to say bear, right? In an environment where everybody, in a saving environment, it seems like you provide opportunities to expand on that saving. And so a lot of those people, as they retire out, they're going to have big chunks of money coming in that have been coming from their vacation and stuff that they saved up for a zillion years. They're also going to have 401ks and things like that they're going to want to have things to do with. Feels like this is an opportunity to wrap up something like Pop.io or Zoom services or whatever, to really get those specialists in front of people to try to put that money somewhere that's advantageous for them, but also can drive some fee revenue or some opportunity revenue for the Crayons. It feels like we, you know, if that's the wave, then we got to start thinking that way.
Yeah, I don't think that you're far off from that. I mean, the problem is, again, in today's day, it's really tough to convince anybody that they want to put anything in the market. We certainly aren't going to pay it on CDs because, again, we can't make investments right now. There's just nothing there. You know, you look at.
Yeah, no, you got to know where to go, and that's actually part of the discussion we were talking to. Was what does that mean when we see the next wave of stimulus ACH checks, right, Glenn? And then in a minute, I'll talk a little bit about crypto, and I got some reports I want you guys to run, which I know you love to do, Jonathan. I know you love doing it. Gary lives for it. I got one that I know you guys are going to dig, and it's going to freak you out. But let's so talk about that, Glenn, a little bit. So how does this stimulus decision that's in process right now affect things in your mind in terms of payments, and does it hurt, Harl?
I'm thinking about it. Well, when you're talking about the individual stimulus, and then, you know, we don't know exactly what this, you know, the second round is going to look like.
Yeah, given that we don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like based on what we're hearing, there will be something that will be a second round of the rough, usually $1,200 checks or direct deposits or whatever that went out back in April. I've heard some stories that say that you know, to your point, Kevin, you know, by now you should have been seeing credit go back up. But one of the beliefs was, well, that was another place where people had added liquidity because that went to everybody. And as you know, as bad as things are, you know, at the end of the day, even if unemployment was at 14%, that still means that employment was at 86%. And those people also got checks too. And suddenly that was excess money that at the same time that you don't have travel as an option and you don't have outdoor, you know, restaurants as an option and nightclubs as an option. So you got the money sitting there somehow. So why not go ahead and use it, you know, on your debit card rather than your credit card? But, you know, I think, you know, hopefully people kind of have the, you know, the systems in place now, having gone through it once. But I know that, you know, we wound up with, you know, longer waits on the call centers because people were calling, wondering, hey, did my money come? You know, what is this? Because it wasn't very, you know, familiar. It happened to come out almost exactly on April 15th, and it came from the IRS, and people couldn't tell if it was that or if it was their refund check. So, you know, we've got that whole exercise probably going on again, and it probably means you're going to have more debit spending for at least some period whenever those things go out.
But to his point, so what they're saying today, or what the last GOP or deal that was on the table was what's it really the biggest, you know, at the heart of everything is the $600 payment, and whether or not that is incentivizing people not to go back to work. And, you know, there's a lot of...
You're talking about the supplement on top of unemployment.
Yeah, because to me, that has a bearing on payments as well, because I think people realize, hey, it's starting to run out. I'm going to start hoarding. And I think they paid down their credit card so that they could reduce that, have that as space. So, you know, one thing that could happen if I'm gaming this out, if we were table gaming this, we come back with something like that $200 range, that covers 70% of the income. But then you have to fight the risk factor of whether you're willing to go back to work, which is what Kevin was talking about with the teachers. And so people start to try to live off 70% of their income, and they either adjust by killing off services, which has an impact on the economy, or they adjust by going to the credit cards they just paid down, which will drive up that balance, which will bring income to some extent, but also theoretically longer term, if we don't find a way to open these places back up or give vaccines, then it would cause bankruptcies or you know, shortfalls in credits and delinquencies further down. And so then you could go the opposite way and say, okay, somehow, because right now they don't have enough votes in the House, and I don't want to get too political about it, but they can't even pass their own bill. They need Democrats, and there are a lot of them, including Mitch McConnell, that are leaning towards more than rather than less, to get somewhere in the $400 range, which then would be more like 75% of most people's income. And remember, that was a derivative number calculated because there's no way to figure it out, you know, based on cost of living and everything else across the board. Then maybe people open up their wallets and breathe a sigh, and you start to see it hit up again. I think those are the two things we're looking at.
I think that might be overthinking it, to be honest, because again, remember that unless we have another spike, I mean, we're still only talking 10% unemployment. So we're only talking about this affecting 10% of the people, and it's 70% versus 100% of income. So it doesn't seem like that's enough to be driving the kind of change in behavior that Kevin's talking about.
But
I'm
I
still
think
thinking about the
Kevin's
fact that
factoring
people
in-
just simply aren't spending.
I think Kevin's factoring in the number of people who are not going to return to their jobs because of school.
Yeah, but that's a different story because they wouldn't be eligible for unemployment anyway. You don't get unemployment when you quit.
Depends. If you're an SMB, you might convince them to fire you. I don't know. It's all fascinating.
No, it absolutely is. But I think, to me, it's a very different downturn than we've seen in the past. No question about that.
So here is a question I have, Glenn. So one of the other things we're seeing, and Kevin just alluded to it, so Jonathan, there's no place to go with your money, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we're seeing people go a place. And it's interesting that it looks like it's about 50-50 between crypto and gold. Would you agree?
Is it that much in crypto? I mean, I think it's interesting that both are spiking. Gold's been spiking for a longer time. Crypto suddenly shot through the roof just in the last week or two. I didn't realize there was quite as much going into crypto, but I mean, absolutely, gold is one of the challenges.
We don't know. And so here's my digital reporting challenge for the Jonathans, the Garys, and whoever else wants to take it on, is run a report that says how much money is leaving your credit union for, and I don't think anybody's monitoring this, companies like CoinDesk, Bittrex, Trinix, CoinMama, and then also look for the big gold consortiums, including the EFTs. And I don't know the names of all of them, but I know Dylan Gage, the Canadian Mint, some of those. We need to see what that flight looks like. And I don't know that anybody's running reports like that. Is anybody running any reports like that?
We're not, that's for sure.
It's a scary report. I ran it once for a small credit union, and it was a very small credit union, and they were blown away by how much money was leaving the credit union, and the scale of it, and the people. And Kevin, you were invited. We did this with a bigger credit union. Kevin was part of it for our innovation club. We're going to be doing some more of that. But it also turned out the age groups, the demographics were not anything of what you thought it might be either. You thought it was all a bunch of hipster crypto guys spreading their crypto everywhere. And the massive number was somewhere between the 40 and 50 age range, the mid 50s that were taking flight on that.
So we have the top merchants report already. And so I have that data. We haven't necessarily grouped it together by those. So
Look for Coinbase.
I'll be looking
at
at
that.
that.
Search on Coinbase.
Yeah. We'll be looking at that for sure.
Because that's the only way they can get money into Coinbase. But I wonder, because here's a situation we didn't have in 2008, was these other areas that drain liquidity that people are running to that store money that are also spendable, because gold is not a spendable asset in that regard. You're not going to get a gold, there's places that do it, but not at a high level where you're going to put a bunch of gold in. There wasn't the Robin Hoods of the world. And, that'd be another one I would look at highly. I would also look at, I think Cash App's doing it now. There's a variety of them that are giving that ability to do that.
Yeah, we'll be looking at that.
Yeah. So what do you think, Glenn? What do you think that report looks like?
I think it's there, but I'm more troubled by the logic of the consumer that's doing that, because it sounds to me like if that's happening, they're doing it because they think that that's either a safer place to keep their money or a more profitable place to keep their money. And neither gold nor Bitcoin pays interest. The only thing you're playing on is a speculative game at that point, that it's going to continue to go up. And that is usually the definition of a bubble.
As long as you get out before the bubble pops.
Man, everyone of course is. I mean, everybody's smart enough to do that, right?
Oh yeah, how can you not see it coming? But if that's the case, and we see a whole load of members, lose money, so I think that's something you got to watch. And I think it's going to sound self-serving because obviously you don't want the money leaving, but if you can somehow
as I say, there's an education process too, because if someone's moving it to Bitcoin, is it just because they're looking for Bitcoin to run up, or is it also because they're spending Bitcoin? I've got a hard time believing there's a whole lot of people using Bitcoin as their means of exchange in any real meaningful fashion.
I would, there's two schools of thought on that. I could say, yeah, I probably think you're right in general, but I think that the number of people being paid in Bitcoin is higher than you think. And here's why. Because, you know, the gig economy is much bigger than we think. And we've talked about this frequently. And if you're out of work and sitting at home and got to watch your kids, and Jonathan Silly says, you can't be on the member calls and do your kids thing, but you're really good at PowerPoint or whatever, you're going on Fiverr or you're going on Upwork or something and selling your services. Those aren't good examples because they don't pay in Bitcoin, but there are plenty that do. And you avoid taxes, well, theoretically until you cash it in. But there's, you know, getting someone to pay you from, you know, Uzbekistan is difficult. And having Bitcoin solves that problem.
Well, and that's one of the things, I mean, you're touching on another one that I find even more troubling is this whole notion of the gig economy, which, you know, not that I have any problem with the gig economy, but when things go into a downturn, that is a whole bunch of income that is not really subject to any kind of unemployment protection. So, you know, we're talking about people who lose their jobs, full stop. If your job is in the gig economy and you've got 7 different gigs you pull together, you know, you can either lose 40 or 50% of it and you get no protection, or you might literally lose 100% of it and have no protection.
I see Jonathan writing because he just had the same thought I do, which is got to run me a report to find out who of our members are living off the gig economy, because they all need to be factored into a risk matrix. Am I right, Jonathan?
I'm talking to my BI guys right now.
I mean, that's the stuff that comes out of this. Is the way to survive this is to somehow get some sort of prediction about what's around the corner. Well, Glenn, we're coming towards the end here. I really want to thank you. It was a little last minute. We had a different person lined up, and they're still going to be coming on, and we'll also have our big announcement. But I knew I could count on Glen.
I'm like the Regis Philbin who would always stand in when somebody canceled on Letterman. He could just like walk down.
Regis Philbin, who's that? I'm thinking you're Ryan Seacrest.
I am not Ryan. Actually, can I just mention one thing, because I think it's fun, and I know you're a big Chick-fil-A fan.
Sure.
Jonathan, you mentioned that suddenly the branches are open and, you know, you're getting your coins back in, which is interesting because I know the Fed has even set up a task force. They're so concerned about the coin shortage. So it may be as simple as just getting the branches open again and they'll start to flow. But I don't know if you saw the story. It's not a Chick-fil-A corporate initiative, but there are at least 2 Chick-fil-A's that have started an offer that says if you bring in $10 of coins, we will give you a brand new $10 bill and a coupon for a free sandwich. They're that desperate to actually get coins back into the mix. So that's a pretty good indicator. My brain doesn't work in terms of the flow as far as why there's this coin shortage, but obviously it exists.
I think I know why. Because when you first said it, my initial instinct was the Fed wants my coins. I'm not giving it to them. Like, I think they artificially created this. Just the fact that they want them makes me want to hoard them and hide them.
I guess it's a question of who's going to be sending out the message, because it's not the Fed that wants them. It's the problem that the Fed can't provide. I mean, I'm hearing stories anecdotally. I haven't heard of anybody specifically who's had this happen, but there are particularly small businesses who are dealing with trying to replenish their cash drawers who have been rationed, and they've not been able to get their full, you know.
It's here in Colorado. I mean, but let's go to the conspiracy side of things. It's just a way for all of them to round up. None of them round down. Yeah. Nobody said we're rounding down on this. Nobody said, hey, we don't have any coins. It was $11.98. Now it's $11. It's $12. So
I thought it was also interesting that the 2 Chick-fil-A's that are doing this both happen to be in college towns. It may be a pure coincidence.
Yeah, Lynchburg
and Huntsville. And I was wondering if that might be a function of either the types of students that, you know, are all using cards and therefore hadn't been giving their coins, or maybe it's a belief that there's a whole bunch of students with a whole bunch of jars at home that could suddenly just kind of monetize those.
So I know Lynchburg, where's Huntsville? Who is that?
Huntsville's the University of Alabama. Tuscaloosa. It's a satellite campus. It's
okay,
also
I was going to say, I was thinking that's Tuscaloosa. I was wondering if that was Auburn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's just weird. And it's weird to hear that Jonathan has all the coins. I'm with you. I cannot put together a flow that says that the coins were, it just seems like they should have been
Because
static. I don't understand.
everything else that we've been talking about is people have stopped using cash. And the whole beginning of this conversation was contactless. So the only way you've got cash or coins going back to the consumer would be if they gave you cash in the first place. So you'd think the need to make that change went down as well. That's the part that threw me.
I'm confused. We're going to do a whole episode on this, where the coins.
But hopefully the problem will go away as soon as Jonathan gets all his members to get their coins back.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, folks, can't thank you enough for taking the time to join. As always, my participants, people that are willing to talk, Kevin Wright really stepping up today, and I'm thankful for that, giving us some valuable information on what's going on in Florida. Highly encourage you to reach out to the folks, and if you've got ideas, thoughts, or seeing something different, you know, this is how we win, is collaborating here. These reports we just talked about, those will be valuable to help, you know, survive this. You know, what is it, the old PSA, the more you know. We have to run a million different reports because the way out of this is going to be somehow at least getting it down to a couple of choices that are, you know, two or three likely outcomes that you can plan for. It can't be the way it is, which is a zillion. And the way to do that is to trend this out, to follow it up, to identify your risks, to think them through, to think these things through, because it's human behavior. All of it's human behavior. The idea that there are people in the gig economy leads me, you know, and they have to pay somehow. Everything always leads back to ACH or credit cards or debit cards that they're either getting paid or paying for. And I'd be interested to know the people that are using the gig economy as well. You know, you think about Uber drivers, things like that. So it's game on for us. And like the guys at Khan Academy in their little video where they said, hey, they looked at each other, looked left and right and said, this is our moment. I think this is credit union's moment. This is the moment to really help the members and to figure it out. And if we are who we say we are, then our whole purpose will be to figure out how to maximize, you know, their opportunity to survive this and come out on the other side as strong. And I know we are who we said we are. I've been working in this industry, you know, too long not to know that. So I'm thankful that we have all these folks. Look for some announcements before the end of the week. I think you're going to like them. We're going to be doing a little upgrading, a little changing, a little fun. And as always, Big is here to do some work. We're doing lots of digital updates for Alchemy. If you have an Alchemy product and you're interested in working with us, we'd love to talk to you. We can add things to it, and it's all, Alchemy's good with us doing it. And you need digital stuff. Also, we're about to roll out something new in our 5 platform that'll make it very, very quick and very cheap to get up and running. We're going to be announcing that here probably in a week. I think you guys are going to like that. It's going to allow you to get contactless with voice very, very quickly, as well as integrating Pop.io and allowing you to make video calls on Alexa, those sorts of things. It's going to be pretty fantastic. So stick around to see what we got coming. And thank you as always. If any of that interests you, Rick Cranston is on this call and he would be happy to talk to you, set up as much as you want, or you can reach out to me. And if you need payments help, if you want the kind of genius that you just heard, Glen Sarvady's the man. I know lots of cranes that have worked with him. Nobody's ever been disappointed. All the rodents have left every branch he's ever been in. And so, oh no, it's not his extermination ability. It's his, never mind, it's his payment stuff. But either way, he brings good business and good thoughts. And I'm thankful for him as a friend, as well as a friend of the credit union industry. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.